I'm Victoria Sterling, 29 years old, and I never thought I'd have to protect my inheritance from my own family. When my grandmother Eleanor died, she left me her entire tech company worth $50 million. But when my family discovered we were about to go public, and my shares would be worth $200 million, they tried to force me to sign fraudulent documents claiming I was mentally unstable. They had no idea I'd already transferred everything to an ironclad trust and hired the best lawyers in Silicon Valley. Their faces when the FBI showed up at their door, priceless. If you're watching this, please hit subscribe to discover powerful family stories every day. Trust me, what happens next will show you exactly why protecting your legacy sometimes means standing against everyone you love. Growing up in Palo Alto meant understanding technology before I could legally drive. My grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, had built Quantum Leap Technologies from her garage in 1985, transforming a simple AI algorithm into one of Silicon Valley's most innovative companies. While other kids played video games, I spent summers learning to code and understanding the delicate balance between artificial intelligence and human creativity. Eleanor was more than my grandmother. She was my mentor, my business partner, and the only family member who truly understood my passion for technology. By age 16, I was helping her debug complex machine learning algorithms. By 25, I'd earned my computer science degree from Stanford and was leading Quantum Leap's AI development team. My dream was always to carry on her legacy of ethical AI innovation. My brother Alexander, 3 years older, had different priorities. Alex was the charming son who could talk his way into any venture capital meeting, but couldn't commit to actually building anything sustainable. While I studied computer science at Stanford, Alex dropped out of business school to launch a series of failed startups. His ventures, a social media platform for pets, a cryptocurrency for gamers, and a food delivery app for organic smoothies, all burned through investor money within months before collapsing amid poor planning and mismanaged funds. My parents, Richard and Margaret Sterling, had always enabled Alex's failures while expecting me to be the responsible one. When Alex's first startup collapsed, they refinanced their retirement home to give him a fresh start. When his second venture failed, they liquidated their savings accounts. The pattern was exhausting and predictable. Alex would pitch big dreams, fail spectacularly, and our parents would sacrifice their financial security to fund his next revolutionary idea. Eleanor watched this cycle with growing concern. During our last coding session together, just months before her death, she pulled me aside in the server room, where the hum of quantum processors filled the air like electronic meditation. "Victoria," she said, her weathered hands still steady as she reviewed our latest AI breakthrough, "I've been thinking about the future of this company. Your parents mean well, but they don't understand what we've built here. Alex sees dollar signs where we see innovation that could change the world." I nodded, understanding the weight behind her words. Quantum Leap wasn't just a business. It was 20 years of careful research, relationships with top universities, and a reputation built algorithm by algorithm. "Promise me something," Eleanor continued, her sharp blue eyes serious. "Whatever happens to me, don't let them turn this place into quick cash. The technology, the research, the potential, it's worth more than money. It could revolutionize how humans interact with artificial intelligence." That conversation haunted me after her sudden stroke 3 months later. At the funeral, while I grieved the loss of my mentor, I couldn't help noticing how quickly Alex and my parents began discussing practical matters and maximizing shareholder value. The will reading took place in the conference room of Morrison, Chen and Associates, the law firm that had handled Eleanor's affairs for 15 years. Attorney James Morrison, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, had known our family since I was a child. The mahogany conference table reflected the afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows overlooking downtown San Francisco. My parents sat rigidly in their chairs. Alex fidgeted with his latest smartphone prototype, and I clutched a tissue, still processing Eleanor's death. Morrison opened the leather-bound document with ceremonial gravity. Eleanor Sterling was very specific about her wishes. Morrison began adjusting his reading glasses. She revised this will multiple times in her final year to ensure it precisely reflected her vision for Quantum Leap's future. The preliminary bequests were standard: charitable donations to Stanford's AI Research Department, gifts to longtime employees, and modest amounts to extended family members. Then Morrison reached the heart of the document: to my beloved granddaughter Victoria Sterling, who has shown unwavering dedication to our company's mission and possesses both the technical expertise and ethical foundation necessary to guide Quantum Leap into the future. I leave 60% of all company shares, including voting control. The silence that followed was deafening. Alex's phone clattered to the table. My mother's sharp intake of breath echoed in the room. My father's face flushed red as he processed the implications. There must be some mistake, my mother finally said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Eleanor wouldn't have wanted to create such an imbalance in the family ownership structure. Morrison's expression remained professionally neutral. Mrs. Sterling, I assure you that Eleanor was quite clear about her decision. She specifically stated that Victoria demonstrated the technical competence and ethical judgment necessary to maintain Quantum Leap's research integrity and continue its mission. Alex leaned forward, his charming facade cracking. What about me? I'm her grandson too. This isn't fair distribution. Your grandmother established separate provisions for you, Morrison explained, sliding documents across the table. You and your parents will share the remaining 40% of company shares with specific provisions for board representation and profit sharing. My father studied the documents with his CEO's eye for detail. How much are we talking about in terms of company valuation? Morrison consulted his notes. Quantum Leap Technologies was recently appraised at approximately $50 million. However, there are some additional factors that significantly impact the inheritance value. He paused, pulling out another folder. Eleanor was in advanced negotiations for an initial public offering. Based on preliminary investment bank assessments, the company's post-IPO valuation could reach $400 million within 18 months. The math hit everyone simultaneously. My 60% stake would be worth $240 million after the IPO. Even the family's 40% would be worth $160 million, more money than any of us had ever imagined. This changes everything, Alex said, his voice rising with excitement. We need to accelerate the IPO timeline. Strike while the AI market is hot. Actually, Morrison interjected, Eleanor included specific provisions about the IPO process. Victoria, as majority shareholder, has final approval authority over all major corporate decisions, including the timing and structure of any public offering. As we left the law office, the family dynamics had shifted permanently. My parents walked ahead in hushed, urgent conversation. Alex stormed to his Tesla without speaking to anyone. I remained behind to discuss practical matters with Morrison, but I could feel the weight of their resentment already building. Over the following weeks, my family's behavior became increasingly strange. Phone calls that stopped abruptly when I entered rooms. Hushed conversations that shifted to mundane topics whenever I appeared. My parents, who had initially offered condolences and support, became distant and calculating. The first concrete sign of trouble came during a family dinner 6 weeks after the will reading. I'd driven to my parents' house in their upscale Palo Alto neighborhood, bringing a bottle of wine and updates on Quantum Leap's IPO preparations. The atmosphere felt forced from the moment I arrived. How are things going with the public offering? My father asked over dinner, his tone carefully casual. Complex but promising, I replied. The investment banks are excited about our AI applications. We could be looking at a $400 million valuation, possibly higher. Alex, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Must be overwhelming having all that responsibility and all that pressure from investors. It's manageable, I said. Eleanor prepared me well for this transition. But still, my mother added, it's a lot for one person to handle. Maybe it would make more sense to bring in some family support, share the burden of major decisions. I set down my wine glass, recognizing the beginning of a coordinated effort. What kind of support are you thinking about? My parents exchanged a meaningful glance before my father answered. Well, your mother and I have extensive business experience. Alex understands the startup ecosystem. We could form a family board to help guide the company through the IPO process. A family board, I repeated, alarm bells ringing in my mind. Nothing formal, my mother added quickly. Just family working together to honor Eleanor's legacy and maximize value for everyone. But their body language told a different story. This wasn't a casual suggestion. It was a carefully planned proposal they'd rehearsed. I politely deflected their offer and left early, but I knew this conversation was far from over. The pressure intensified over the following month. My parents began showing up at Quantum Leap, unannounced, asking detailed questions about our technology and financial projections. Alex started bringing potential strategic partners to tour our facilities, claiming he was helping me explore acquisition opportunities. Most concerning was a conversation I overheard between my parents and Alex in the company's conference room after hours. I'd returned to retrieve some documents I'd forgotten and heard voices from the main building. The key is getting her to agree to the board structure, my father was saying. Once we have formal voting representation, we can make decisions collectively. And if she refuses, Alex asked, then we move to Plan B, my mother replied. Morrison mentioned that inheritance disputes can be complex, especially when beneficiaries are overwhelmed by sudden responsibility. My blood ran cold. They were discussing challenging Eleanor's will, the will that represented her carefully considered wishes and my life's work. That night, I called David Mitchell, my best friend from Stanford, and now a successful corporate attorney specializing in tech company disputes. David had always been my voice of reason during family crises, and I desperately needed his perspective. They're planning something, I told him over the phone, pacing my apartment overlooking the bay. I can feel it, the way they're acting, the questions they're asking. It's not normal grief or concern about the company. David listened carefully as I described the family dinner conversation and what I'd overheard at the office. His legal mind immediately identified the potential threats. Victoria, you need to be very careful here, he said. Will contests involving tech companies are serious business, especially when IPO valuations are involved. Even frivolous challenges can delay public offerings for years and cost millions in legal fees. But Eleanor was completely competent when she made the will. Morrison confirmed that. That doesn't matter if they're willing to make false claims about her mental state or allege undue influence on your part. The burden of proof can be surprisingly complex when hundreds of millions are at stake. David's next suggestion surprised me. I think you should hire a private investigator to document what they're actually planning. If they're conspiring to challenge the will fraudulently, you need evidence of their real motivations. Within a week, I'd retained Marcus Chen, a former FBI agent, who now specialized in corporate investigations. Marcus was thorough, discreet, and had extensive experience with family business disputes. His initial findings were more disturbing than I'd anticipated. Your brother's in serious financial trouble, Marcus reported during our first meeting at a coffee shop in downtown Palo Alto. He owes approximately $2.3 million to various creditors, including some venture capital firms that don't typically accept payment plans. Failed startup debts, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Marcus nodded grimly. Among others, he borrowed heavily against future inheritance expectations to fund his latest venture, Social Pet, which collapsed last month. The creditors are getting impatient, and your parents have been scrambling to find solutions. The pieces were falling into place. My family's sudden interest in Quantum Leap wasn't about honoring Eleanor's legacy or helping me manage the business. It was about accessing liquid assets to pay off Alex's debts before the creditors took legal action. There's more, Marcus continued, sliding a folder across the table. Your parents have been meeting with a different attorney, not Morrison, someone who specializes in will contests and inheritance disputes. The attorney was Richard Blackwood, a man with a reputation for aggressive tactics and questionable ethics. If my family had retained Blackwood, they were serious about challenging Eleanor's will. Marcus's investigation revealed the full scope of their plan within 2 weeks. Using his contacts in the legal community and careful surveillance, he uncovered a conspiracy that went far beyond a simple will contest. They're not just planning to challenge the will, Marcus explained during our second meeting. They've been working on this for months, possibly since before your grandmother's death. He showed me photographs of documents he'd obtained through legal channels, draft petitions claiming Eleanor had been suffering from dementia, affidavits from supposed witnesses who would testify about her declining mental state, and most damaging of all, forged medical records suggesting cognitive impairment. These medical records are fabricated, Marcus said, pointing to inconsistencies in the documentation. The dates don't match Eleanor's actual medical appointments, and the neurologist listed retired 3 years before these supposed consultations. The scope of their deception was breathtaking. They hadn't just decided to contest the will, they'd been manufacturing evidence to support their challenge. This wasn't family disappointment, it was criminal fraud. What's their end game? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Marcus pulled out another set of documents. If they successfully contest the will, California's intestacy laws would distribute the company's shares equally among all direct descendants. Your parents would receive significant portions as Eleanor's children, and Alex would get an equal stake with you as grandchildren. The math was simple and devastating. Instead of controlling 60% of a $400 million company, I would receive approximately 25% under intestacy distribution, more than enough to pay off Alex's debts and leave plenty for my parents to reclaim their financial security. How long do I have before they file? I asked. Based on their timeline, probably 10 days. Blackwood has been preparing the paperwork, and they're waiting for one final piece, a psychiatric evaluation claiming Eleanor was incompetent. That evaluation would be as fraudulent as the medical records, but it might be enough to create reasonable doubt about Eleanor's mental state. Even if I ultimately won the contest, the legal battle could last years and delay the IPO indefinitely. David flew up from Los Angeles the next day to help me develop a response strategy. We met at Quantum Leap in the early morning, walking through the research labs as the sun rose over Silicon Valley. The 2024 AI prototypes were approaching breakthrough status, and the sight of our cutting-edge technology strengthened my resolve to protect what Eleanor had built. We have several options, David explained as we walked past quantum computing arrays. We can wait for them to file and then defend the will, which puts us in a reactive position. Or we can take proactive steps to protect the assets before they can challenge anything. What kind of proactive steps? David stopped beside our main server room, its LED lights blinking like electronic stars. We create an irrevocable trust and transfer all shares into it immediately. Once that's done, there's nothing for them to contest because you no longer technically own the shares. The trust does. The strategy was elegant and legally sound. As the beneficiary of Eleanor's will, I had the right to transfer inherited assets however I chose. An irrevocable trust would protect everything from future legal challenges while ensuring the company remained operational under my management. How quickly can we set this up? I asked. With Marcus's evidence of their fraudulent planning, we can expedite everything. I can have the trust documents ready by tomorrow, and we can complete the transfers within 48 hours. That afternoon, we began the most intense legal sprint of my life. David worked with his Los Angeles firm, to draft comprehensive trust documents, while I coordinated with Morrison to prepare asset transfer paperwork. Marcus continued monitoring my family's activities to ensure we stayed ahead of their timeline. The trust structure was sophisticated but straightforward. All Quantum Leap shares would be held by the Victoria Sterling Innovation Trust, with me as the primary beneficiary and David as successor trustee. The trust was designed to preserve Eleanor's vision while providing me complete operational control. Thursday evening, as David and I finalized the trust documents in Morrison's conference room, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Family meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. Critical company matters to discuss. Don't be late. The timing wasn't coincidental. Marcus's sources indicated that Blackwood planned to file the will contest on Monday morning. My family was calling one final meeting to pressure me into cooperation before launching their legal assault. We need to complete the transfers tonight, David said, recognizing the urgency. Once they file that contest, any asset transfers could be challenged as fraudulent conveyances. Morrison, despite his age and the late hour, worked tirelessly to expedite the paperwork. By midnight, we had completed the legal documentation for transferring the Quantum Leap shares. The company's board would need to approve the transfers, but as majority shareholder, I could call an emergency meeting. Friday morning brought a flurry of activity. While my family prepared for their evening ambush, I was at Quantum Leap's headquarters, completing the final asset transfers. The emergency board meeting was held at 2 p.m., with all members attending virtually. The share transfers were unanimously approved by 4 p.m. At 6:30 p.m., 1 hour before the family meeting, David called with confirmation that all transfers were legally complete and properly recorded. Quantum Leap Technologies and all associated assets were now held in an irrevocable trust that my family could not touch, challenge, or claim. I drove to my parents' house, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and determination. I was about to confront the people who had raised me, loved me, and now planned to defraud me. But I was also protecting the legacy that Eleanor had entrusted to me and ensuring that her life's work wouldn't be sacrificed to pay for Alex's mistakes. The scene at my parents' house was carefully orchestrated. Alex sat in the living room's main armchair, looking more confident than I'd seen him in months. My parents flanked him on the sofa, their expressions serious but determined. On the coffee table lay a folder of documents, undoubtedly their fraudulent evidence and legal papers. "Victoria, thank you for coming." My father began, his CEO voice, formal and authoritative. "We need to discuss some serious concerns about Eleanor's estate and the company's future." I took the chair furthest from the group, maintaining emotional distance from what I knew was coming. "What kind of concerns?" My mother leaned forward, her expression carefully crafted to convey reluctant worry. "We've been reviewing the circumstances around Eleanor's final months, and we're troubled by some things we've discovered, such as," Alex jumped in, abandoning any pretense of subtlety, "such as the fact that Grandma was clearly not thinking straight when she made that will. She was sick, confused, and you were the only one spending time with her. It's obvious you influenced her." "Influenced her? How?" I asked calmly, though my heart was racing. My father opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "We have medical records indicating that Eleanor was suffering from early-stage dementia. Her physician documented concerning symptoms of cognitive decline." I recognized the forged medical records that Marcus had identified. The audacity of their deception was staggering. They were willing to lie about Eleanor's mental health to steal her legacy. "We also have witness statements," my mother added, producing more fraudulent documents, "from people who observed Eleanor's confusion and disorientation during her final year. This is very difficult for all of us," my father continued, "but we have a legal and moral obligation to ensure Eleanor's true wishes are honored." The will, as written, doesn't reflect what she would have wanted if she'd been thinking clearly. I let them finish their presentation, watching as they laid out their entire fraudulent case. When they were done, the room fell silent, waiting for my response. "Are you finished?" I asked quietly. My mother nodded, her expression expectant. They clearly believed I would be intimidated by their evidence and legal threats. "Good," I said, standing up. "Because there's something you should know about quantum leap technologies." I pulled out my own folder containing copies of the trust documents and transfer confirmations. As of this afternoon, all shares from Eleanor's inheritance have been transferred to an irrevocable trust. The company, the technology, the IPO rights, everything is now legally protected. The silence that followed was absolute. Alex's confident expression crumbled. My parents stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "That's not possible," my father finally said. "The estate is still being settled." "The estate settlement was completed yesterday," I corrected. "Morrison expedited the final distributions, and I immediately transferred everything to the trust." My mother's face flushed with anger. "You went behind our backs. You knew we had concerns about the will." "I knew you were planning to commit fraud," I replied calmly. "Yes, I know about the forged medical records, the fake witness statements, and your attorney Richard Blackwood." Alex shot to his feet, his composure completely gone. "You had us investigated. What kind of sick person spies on their own family? The kind who refuses to let her grandmother's legacy be destroyed to pay off startup debts," I answered. The truth hung in the air like a toxic cloud. All pretense was gone now. We all knew exactly what this was about. My father tried to regain control of the situation. "Even if you've created this trust, we can still challenge it in court. Fraudulent transfers can be reversed." "With what evidence?" I asked. "The forged medical records, the fabricated witness statements. I have documentation proving every piece of your case is fraudulent." I pulled out copies of Marcus's investigation, including photographs of their meetings with Blackwood and evidence of the document forgeries. Their faces went pale as they realized the scope of what I knew. "You've been planning this since before Eleanor died," I continued. "This isn't about her mental state or her true wishes. This is about Alex's debts and your financial problems." My mother's carefully maintained facade finally cracked. "You have no idea what we've been through. The stress, the sleepless nights worrying about what those creditors might do to Alexander. Then maybe you should have thought about that before enabling his startup addiction for years," I replied. Alex exploded. "Enabling? They've been trying to help me. Unlike you, sitting in your perfect little tech bubble, judging everyone else's problems." "Help." I stood up, my own anger finally surfacing. "They've been preventing you from facing consequences. Every time you fail, they bail you out. Every time you make a bad decision, they sacrifice their own security to fix it. That's not help. That's enabling." My father tried a different approach. "Victoria, we understand you're upset, but families should support each other. Eleanor's company could solve everyone's problems." "At what cost?" I demanded. "Destroying the technology she spent 20 years developing, liquidating the research that could revolutionize AI, committing fraud to steal what she legally left to me." The room fell silent again. The weight of their actions, the lies, the forgeries, the willingness to destroy family relationships for money, hung heavy in the air. "This conversation is over," I said, gathering my documents. "The trust is irrevocable and legally protected. If you want to challenge it in court, you're welcome to try, but you'll be doing it with fraudulent evidence that could land you in prison." As I reached the door, my mother called after me. "If you walk out that door, you're choosing money over family." I turned back one last time. "No, I'm choosing integrity over fraud. There's a difference." The following weeks were emotionally brutal, but legally straightforward. My family did consult with Blackwood about challenging the trust, but when he learned about Marcus's evidence of their document forgeries, he withdrew from the case. No other attorney would take on a will contest based on fabricated evidence. Alex's creditor's situation reached a crisis point within days of our confrontation. The venture capital firms he'd borrowed from weren't interested in family drama or legal disputes. They wanted their money immediately. My parents, faced with the reality that Quantum Leap's assets were beyond their reach, finally stopped enabling Alex's destructive behavior. Instead of bailing him out again, they insisted he file for bankruptcy and enter a residential treatment program for entrepreneurship addiction, a real condition affecting many Silicon Valley personalities. It was the first time in his adult life that they'd refused to rescue him from consequences, and ironically, it was the beginning of his actual recovery. I received a call from Alex 3 weeks later. He was in a treatment facility in Arizona, sounding more sober and honest than I'd heard him in years. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "Not just for the will contest thing, but for everything. For expecting you to sacrifice Grandma's legacy to fix my mistakes." "Alex," I started, but he continued. "No, let me finish. I've been in therapy here, and I'm starting to understand how messed up our family dynamics have been. Mom and Dad always bailing me out, you always being the responsible one, everyone pretending my startup failures weren't a real problem." His voice cracked slightly. "I destroyed something beautiful that Grandma built, and I almost convinced our parents to help me do it. That's not the person I want to be anymore." The conversation was painful, but necessary. Alex committed to staying in treatment for 6 months and working with a financial counselor to address his debts through legitimate means. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the first honest step he'd taken in years. My relationship with my parents took longer to repair. They struggled to accept that their enabling behavior had been harmful rather than helpful. Family therapy sessions were tense and difficult, but gradually we began to rebuild trust based on honesty rather than manipulation. 6 months after the confrontation, I stood in Quantum Leap's main conference room, preparing for our IPO announcement. The company had exceeded all projections. Our AI technology had attracted partnerships with major tech giants, and our valuation had reached $500 million. Eleanor would have been proud of what we'd achieved, despite the family turmoil. David Mitchell, now serving as our general counsel, approached with a glass of champagne. "Eleanor's vision," he said with a smile. "I think we got it right this year." I looked around the room filled with brilliant engineers, researchers, and innovators who had made Quantum Leap a leader in ethical AI development. The trust had not only protected Eleanor's legacy, but allowed it to flourish. We'd maintained our research integrity, expanded our university partnerships, and developed technology that would benefit humanity rather than exploit it. David joined me on the conference room's balcony, overlooking the Silicon Valley landscape that stretched toward the mountains. "Any regrets?" he asked, knowing how difficult the past months had been. I considered the question carefully. The family relationships would never be the same. The trust I'd once had in my parents and brother had been shattered and would take years to rebuild, if it ever could be. But Eleanor's legacy was secure, and that had been worth fighting for. "No regrets," I said finally. "Eleanor trusted me to protect what she'd built, and that's exactly what I did." My phone buzzed with a text from Alex, now 6 months sober and working as a junior developer at a small startup in Phoenix. "Saw the TechCrunch article about your IPO. Grandma would be proud. I'm proud too." It was a small gesture, but it represented something larger. The possibility that our family might eventually heal from the damage we'd inflicted on each other. Not by pretending the betrayal hadn't happened, but by acknowledging it and choosing to move forward differently. As the sun set over Silicon Valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I raised my glass in a silent toast to Eleanor. Her legacy lived on, not just in the technology we produced, but in the courage she'd given me to stand firm when everything I loved was threatened. Quantum Leap Technologies would continue for generations to come, protected by the trust and guided by the values Eleanor had instilled in me. Some inheritances are measured in dollars, but the most valuable things she'd left me, integrity, determination, and the strength to do what's right even when it's painful, were worth far more than money. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have protected your grandmother's legacy or found a way to help your family despite their deception? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story about standing up for what's right while navigating complex family dynamics, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences about family inheritance and the courage to protect what matters most. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest gift we can give our family is refusing to enable their destructive behavior.